On today's 7th Circle Gaming, we analyze the game Shadow Empire, and we start off in our usual manner with the full disclosure. And as always, you are cordially invited to pause the video now and read through all of these at your leisure, or if you'd prefer not to, we'll jump right into the first screenshot. Now, in our first screenshot, we're just illustrating one part of the customization that the game provides players with. We're going to touch on this a little bit later, so don't worry too much about it now. Just be aware that this is part of the customization. In our second screenshot, we're illustrating another part of the customization. This is more of a sort of question and answer segment that the game provides players with to define the various aspects, or further define down the aspects of their culture, or empire as the game prefers to use. In our third screenshot, we aim to illustrate the combat interface. Combat in Shadow Empire is particularly hands-off. We'll touch on that a bit later, but there's a significant amount of random number generation in the combat. Now then, in our next screenshot, since we've already talked about the game world fairly significantly, we're now going to share with you what the game world itself looks like. There are menus all over the place here. There's menus on the bottom, there's menus on the right. There's icons, or there would be icons on the left if we were able to capture all of the different menus and icons that the game provides players with. Most of which are interactable and have tooltips or various other information about them. However, at the start of every turn, players are going to most likely be paying attention to the button on the top right marked as DEC, which is short for decisions, which should be fairly self-explanatory. It's basically decisions that need to be made between turns. And with that, we're going to share with you one final screenshot, which is an example of one of these decisions, which we've chosen or elected to share with you because this takes the place very much of any sort of research tree that we've been able to find, which is something that we'll touch on a bit later. So just be aware that this is an example of what one of the decisions might look like in the game. Moving right along to our first chapter proper, which is Immersion. Here the game has earned a 5.5 out of 15. The presentation is top-down, and the game is obviously a science fiction, turn-based strategy tactics game. Very much centered on a management style game rather than any sort of specific down in the trenches with the troops tactics game. The game does provide a player with a fair amount of agency in the sense that they are provided several opportunities to create a custom civilization with start conditions that appeal to the player. The game will also provide players with cutscenes in between their turns that will add an element of story to it. Finally, as one might expect with any sort of turn-based tactics game, the game does attempt to use statistics focus to get players invested into the game world. In that, the game will be providing various statistics for players to examine and attempt to optimize to ensure their chances of success. And moving on then to our second chapter, difficulty. Here the game has earned a 3.5 out of 15. While the key commands are not unusual for the genre, the game does have a very complex user interface which lacks any sort of tutorial. There is a user manual, which is found on the load screen. If players prefer to ignore that, they will be doing a fair amount of learning by doing, or checking wikis and other gameplay videos. Otherwise, let's move right along to The Lasting Appeal. Here the game has earned a 3 out of 15. The game does provide plenty of options for multiple playthroughs. There are several possible planets that players can found their empires on, with a variety of statistics and a variety of environmental systems. The game does also provide is claiming to have some DLC coming soon, and it does additionally have mod support. However, this does not appear to be through the Steam Workshop or any traditional means, which might require some additional fiddling and some light coding. So then, let's move on to our final chapter. Overall score. Overall, Shadow Empire has earned a 4 out of 15. In all of our evaluation sessions, we did find that some self-immersion may be required, which is to say that players may find themselves having to want to continue. The game certainly supports learning by doing rather than any sort of tutorials, as we mentioned earlier. The game does, on the other hand, provide a significant amount of player agency. As we said, units can be named almost anything, and planets and various other things can be named almost anything the player cares to. The key bindings are not unfamiliar to players experienced with the genre. The user interface is fairly complex, but not overly complex for players that are familiar with the genre. The combat, on the other hand, is very hands-off and very random number generation dice rolling things. So players that are very much interested in the sort of tactical sleights of hand that they might find in other games won't find it here. Now then, we'll finish up with a very highly subjective statement, so grains of salt over both shoulders and all that. We did find that Shadow Empire is a very intelligent game, written by highly educated people, apparently so, as we attempted to illustrate with that first screenshot. Viewers of this video that look at that will notice that the game utilizes the term AU, which is short for astronomical unit. That's only one of the very scientific words that the game is going to be using. And the description of the planet's atmosphere, it provides a very scientific, very chemistry-centric breakdown using the chemical symbols from the periodic table and the number of parts per million, or ppms, of that particular element. One other thing that we would include that is something of a nicety is the game does not necessarily assume that simply because this is taking place on a different planet that everything has been utterly forgotten without reasons. So research trees are something of a thing of the past. So just to repeat, the game has earned an overall score of 4 out of 15. And let's finish off by saying thank you very much for watching all the way to the end. If you did, this is the end of the video. If you liked it, fantastic. If you have a game that you'd really like to see on the channel, leave it in the comments section below. Otherwise, our next game will be Partisans 1941. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. And from 7th Circle Gaming, I'll stop wittering on now, and goodbye.